All right, welcome to the Airiam Podcast. This podcast covers topics related to cyber resilience and human resilience. It's geared towards the owners and CEOs of small to medium-sized companies, as well as IT and cybersecurity leaders. My name is Bill Bowman. I'm the Director of Marketing here at Airiam. We have a great episode today. My co-host for today's episode is Airiam's Field CIO and CISO, Art O'Kane. How are you doing, Art?
Hey, pretty good. Nice to see everybody.
Great to see you. And we have a very special guest joining us. Shane Steiger from MITRE is on the episode.
Hello.
Shane. Hey, Shane. Shane does research on cybersecurity, cyber resilience, and innovation for the organization. And I believe he comes to us from the Philadelphia area.
Yes, I do. How are you guys doing today?
Doing great. So, yeah, the MITRE Corporation, it's a nonprofit working to solve some of the nation's biggest challenges in defense, cybersecurity, homeland security, and other fields. So how's your new year starting, Shane?
Well, it's the typical digging out until Groundhog Day when I get to relive it again and again and again. But I'm still just digging out.
A lot of snow on the ground, still up there.
Well, no. It's technically digging out of technical debt, and the challenges of being out on a couple of days off. It's always fun trying to get back into the swing of things and readapt to life after the holidays.
Yes, that's the more difficult digging out sometimes. So we have a great episode. We're gonna cover what MITRE is and how their frameworks, in particular the CREF framework, helps small to medium-sized businesses. But before we get to that, we do like to ask our guests one question to get to know them a little better, get to see how they think, and that's what is your morning routine? How do you get ready to make the most out of the day, Shane?
My day starts with an APT. That's an advanced persistent toddler, also known as my daughter. So she begins my day with wake up, my wife and I hey, get up, I'm hungry. Can you make it less bright in here by turning off the lights? Or like this morning, she asked me to turn off the sun. And then, usually follows that up with Nick Jr., please. And so then I start my caffeine addiction and delivery device, which is usually soda. So once I get that going and get her off to daycare, I start up my home work network, which is separate from my normal home network. And also, it's a separate router, so it's destroying persistence, and start that up. And then once that's up, I start up a host and a couple of VMs and hit the usual news sources, check out some sites, and begin my morning analytic monitoring and contextual awareness adventure, so to speak. And once the caffeine kicks in and the email review starts, then it starts us off to the races.
That's a lot of logistics, especially with the toddlers combined with the whole setup and everything. That's a good way to start.
Yeah, it's definitely a combination of resiliency tactics in order to get to whatever the adventure she's chosen for the day really is.
And I like how you destroy your work network every day. That's pretty awesome. That's a great security nuance that a lot of us don't do. Mm-hmm. And I'll make note of that I need to probably do the same. Just nuke work environment at the end of the day so that the next day I can start with a fresh one. I know that any kind of threat actor that may have gained access to my environment is gone with that new instance. That's a great idea.
Yeah. Awesome. So after you get going, after you turn on all the stuff, you're working with MITRE. So can you tell us a little bit about what MITRE is? I know a lot of listeners, a lot of viewers, they probably heard of it, but they're not quite sure what they do. If you can give a little overview, that would help set the stage.
Yeah, first it's interesting to hear the pronunciation of MITRE in different forms, MITRE.
Oh wow.
And then once we get to MITRE, then it's the question of well what do you who do you work for? It's a not-for-profit organization that manages several federally funded research and development centers. We really seek to solve problems for a safer world. Through our partnerships, federally funded R&D centers, we work across the government and with industry to tackle challenges to safety, stability, and well-being for our nation. And that's actually how I came to know MITRE, because I was working in some of the standards and standards body spaces, and that's how I was somewhat picked up. But MITRE touches your lives every day in ways that you might not even realize. For instance, we secure reliable and enable reliable GPS technologies so that military, public can reach their destinations, including, even protecting space operations from cyber attacks. And, we're a trusted advisor. We help military provide strategic defense against threats from rogue states and other attacks. We also help industry and government protect critical infrastructure such as healthcare, finance, transportation, shipping, and transportation against cyber threats. And then within the cybersecurity industry, using frameworks like Attack, Engage, CREF, Defend, and other cybersecurity frameworks and tool sets, we advance the worldwide community of cyber defenders and give them vital information they need to thwart the network intruders, build resiliency against future threats, develop assurance, and overcome possible vulnerabilities.
Nice. So you're nonprofit, government sponsored. You're the backup. You're kind of you can be kind of a little bit of a resource multiplier of resources for different companies out there in the U.S. and probably even others relying on it. When I first heard about MITRE, when I first learned about MITRE, it was with the the Attack framework, and I might be pronouncing that wrong too because it has an asterisk in it. But the Attack framework is that the kind of the foundational framework for MITRE, and what is that for?
So Attack, a lot of folks know us for Attack. But, MITRE's been involved in cybersecurity before it was even a word. We've been part of cybersecurity in some form for the past 50 years. And, as part of that, our expertise has been relied upon. We produced actually the WARE report back in the 1970s, the very first government report on computer security. And, if you jump forward to the late 90s, we developed the CVE, the Common Vulnerabilities and Exposure, a set of efforts to describe battleground for cyber attacks. And 2013 is when we started to, create these new capabilities to describe what attackers are doing and how cyber defenders might be able to detect and potentially respond to them. And that, that's where you start to see MITRE Attack come into play. And, all the way up through to even now, there are other, obviously other frameworks in the mix. I'll talk about CREF quite a bit, some tidbits folks might not know. But, all the way up to, the Engage framework, all about, giving defenders a new set of tactics to engage attackers. Some deception capabilities, things that make the attacker's life harder and impose costs on their usage of tactics and techniques or living off the land, so to speak. I was just going to say, most people know us for Attack, but, from CVE to CWE to KPEC to, Attack to, Defend and Engage and CREF, there are other things that are in the mix, and we've been leading this space for years. So
absolutely. Yeah, I think what's funny is, most of us that have been in the private industry and have never really touched the government space before, the only exposure we have is Attack, because that's the one that got famous. That's the one that is involved with every security tool and stack now. Every SOAR is comparing against MITRE Attack and is giving you, the TTPs as for that particular threat actor or group. So that is where most of us know MITRE from. But it was funny because when I first started researching cyber resiliency engineering framework, that's when I found out how much MITRE actually did. It wasn't really until I started getting involved in trying to learn more about CREF that I realized, oh, there's a whole deception framework. There's a whole defensive framework. There's a lot here besides just attack. But attack's just the one that got popular with the nerds. So that's the one I hear all the time.
Definitely. So we have attack. Then MITRE created a lot of different frameworks. So the one that we want to talk a little bit about is the Cyber Resiliency Engineering Framework, or CREF. Why was that created apart from attack, and how is that different? And what does that give different organizations out there as far as knowledge and the ability to be more resilient, with reduce the risks of a cyber threat?
Yeah, so I'll start it off with a couple of little interesting tidbits and then give a bit of context based on my journey and highlight the differences as a result. So, CREF was actually in development shortly before attack first begun any development back in 2009 and 10, that time frame. It was an initiative called Rambo.
That's a great acronym too, by the way.
Yeah, I know. And it was called Resilient. It was an effort or initiative, Resilient Architectures for Mission Assurance and Business Objectives. And as a result, it's actually predates attacks just a little bit. Some of the elements that started to make attack were somewhat in play, as described by others, in the attack team when they talk about the history. But the cyber resiliency engineering framework, and now what is codified into NIST Special Pub 800-160 Volume 2, Rev 1, that the cyber resiliency engineering framework that lies under the covers really started with some of that Rambo initiative. And in some ways that it's somewhat of a response to the NIST 853, Rev 4 at the time, and Rev 3, I think even at that time, controls. But as a result, what you start to see is, all right, there's a defensive framework for cyber resiliency that lies under the covers. And my journey with each of the an attack started to get built quietly in the background. My journey with each of the frameworks actually started in 2014 while I was working in industry. And as my first project, I was asked to write up and document 4 to 6 campaigns that would take the organization that I was working for at the time completely down. And it was an interesting project because it was my first 2 months on the job. So it was an assignment of reconnaissance as a new employee.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. I mean, it was awesome. But it was hard and I was scared because I didn't know anything about the organization I was working for. At the time, there were, over 750,000 managed and unmanaged endpoints that could be touching the network at any one point in time. So the only thing I could do was I had to assume similar design patterns and possible threat models to others. And as I was going out and performing the threat modeling and then the documentation for actual testing, I was looking at cyber resiliency frameworks to understand, and that's where I first tripped across the CREF in 2014. So I was to describe those defenses, and one thing I didn't understand is, although I came up with 4 to 6 campaigns that could take the network down and make a bad day for that organization, I knew that the adversary would adapt. So I needed to iterate. So that project actually turned into somewhat of my career in a sense.
Wow.
Moving across. So not only acting as the red team, but also acting as the blue team. How do I adapt to those defenses? And as I was trying to adapt as an adversary, so thinking like the adversary at the time, and building that out, I said, where can I iterate this information of techniques and tactics across an attack lifecycle? And that's where I tripped across a presentation in 2014 that was out there, and I'd already been interacting with MITRE folks in the end, so I asked to speak with the folks who formed attack. And very early on, and I asked to describe what the work that they were working on was, and as a result, I got to then kind of iterate out the red team actions so that I could adapt my blue team actions once the adversary overcame my defenses, even in my 4 to 6 scenarios that I developed.
So I think the interesting thing about that is the amount of adaptation you had to do, as both the attacker and the defender, and you can see that adaptation component in CREF. And I think the kind of unique thing about CREF is that, and really the thing that, one of the things that's separating really just cybersecurity from resilience is that adaptation, is that understanding the attacker is going to always be changing. And you may put in a new firewall today, tomorrow you're putting an endpoint solution, and the next day you're putting in a SIM, the next day it's constantly putting in new segmentation. You're always putting in, whether it's a new investment, a change, whatever, a change in configuration, there's always something that needs to adapt. And the attackers are doing the same thing with the way they're attacking. And that I think is a unique thing about this system that really opened my eyes to the fact that I can't just check boxes on a thing and say, okay, I've gotten this part accomplished. It's really that we have to be on our toes constantly, and that we have to be willing to flex and change how we act internally in order to ensure business continuity, ensure that our operations stay up, and we have to adapt what we're doing to that attack.
Yeah, there's a constant give and take, or a woo and way, between the attacker and defender in that sense. And the attacker has their intended consequences and then their capabilities at play, and oftentimes they're not maximizing their capabilities, and therefore you're not feeling the impact of what kind of consequences they can bring to bear. And as a result, that means that anticipating what that might be that's coming next is absolutely key in order to withstand, recover, and adapt.
Mm-hmm. Awesome.
So adapt are there 4 pillars of the CREF framework? So adapt is one of the 4, kind of the last of the 4. Can you walk through the other pillars and the other elements of the framework?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the big thing for me in my journey was I needed to internalize this work. I actually started out with the original effort in 2013-14. I was downloading some of the original documentation for the cyber resiliency engineering framework, and it was close to 400 pages with references and appendix and so forth. And I had a number of flights that were 6 hours long, going back and forth across the country. So as a result, I got to spend some time reading a number of those pages. And I realized that those pages contained a lot of information. It was great, but it was, it was complex. So it needed to be somewhat containerized for my brain to be able to consume. And I thought, it's likely that I was going to have to teach this or show this to others within my organization in order to get them to buy into the journey. So as a result, I started out with, all right, what is this, CREF thing really trying to do? Yeah. Cyber resiliency engineering framework. It is these 4 goals at the very, very top. It's the ability to anticipate that bad things could happen or are going to happen, and withstand when those bad things happen, so that you can recover quickly and regain minimum business or mission functionality, and then adapt, because bad things have already happened, and you're likely to see similar things in the future. Therefore, you need to adapt the way that you approach those situations. So in order to create a continuous loop, that's to bring you back to anticipate those things the adversary might do, you need to adapt. So the 4 pillars are anticipate, withstand, recover, and adapt. And that is your lighthouse, so to speak, the 4 pillars that folks should really kind of focus themselves towards. And interestingly enough, it is not cyber. That description holds true across any a number of other disciplines outside of cyber. And the other thing is, interestingly enough, a lot of these initial main concepts were found and gathered from those spaces in order to create the original CREF framework.
That's interesting, because like we said at the beginning, MITRE is not just cybersecurity. It's different disciplines and industries that are critical to modern life. So that's mentioning that is definitely calls that out.
Absolutely. I think that this is it can be applied to organizational resilience as well. It's really, if you're thinking about this as more than a cyber thing, any kind of physical attack or sabotage or whatever on a corporate basis, like there's really anything that is bad PR, etc., could be addressed with this kind of framework.
All right, we're going to cut the discussion off there. So the rest of the discussion will be available in the next episode. So in the next episode, we're going to dive more into how MITRE's framework and the CREF framework in particular can help everyday businesses. So make sure you subscribe to the Airiam Podcast and whatever platform you're listening to if you enjoyed the episode. And for more information on MITRE, visit mitre.org or click any of the links below and in the description. Learn more about Airiam at airiam.com. Thanks.